All right, go. Okay. My name is Jonathan. I'm an alcoholic addict. Grateful to be here and speak with everyone tonight. Um, just to fly through quickly. Usually, when I do this, I go through just a little bit of my backstory. Don't like to get into crazy details about things that don't matter, but just to put a face to the name, I always say, that I'm 34 years old. My sobriety date is March 3rd, 2019. So going on, I think 5.5 years sobriety. I grew up in Connecticut, in New York. I had both my parents in my life, very copacetic childhood, um, and working in recovery, being in recovery for years. I mean, I've been trying to get sober for 10 years. Um, you know, you hear all types of different stories, and sometimes people that don't have a crazy um, upbringing, kind of feel like something's wrong with them, and people that do feel like they have a crazy upbringing sometimes feel like they got the raw end of the stick. But for me, my life was very middle of the road. I had one younger brother, both my parents. I was a very happy kid. I grew up in church. My parents prayed with us every night. We weren't rich, we weren't poor, but I was first born and raised in a city in Connecticut, and my parents were from cities. They didn't want me and my brother to get in trouble, so they moved us to a town next to it that was a little more wealthy. Even though my parents had me young, I was the older brother, so we really didn't have anything but the means that we had. And they thought that would keep me out of trouble, so I advocate a lot on that. You can see how that turned out. But yeah, I mean, everything was cool. Big family. My life was baseball. My only dream was really to play for the Yankees and help my parents out with money. I was very talented. I used my addiction early on to practice harder than anyone, work harder than anyone. My idol was Derek Jeter, mostly for off the field. He didn't do drugs. He didn't drink in public. He didn't get in trouble with girl stuff until later with one thing, but he was just clean cut. He did the right thing. He was very respectful the way I was raised. He had morals. And it's amazing where when I look back on my story to where I ended up, it shows the power of addiction. So at 13, I kind of had my first trauma. Everyone I deal with, has some kind of trauma, whether it's something gruesome or it's their parents breaking up, whatever it may be. I work with thousands of people today, getting them help, or guiding them or navigating them, public speaking. And there's always something. My dad died young. My parents split up. My parents beat me, whatever it may be. In my eyes, addiction then becomes a coping mechanism where as a kid, instead of feeling emotions or looking to faith or whatever it may be, we turn to substance, alcohol, drug to have that release. And, I went through a lot of hard times at 13. That was my first trauma. I was playing paintball with some friends, and we had two parents there that were chaperoning us. And my one friend's dad was walking back to the fort with me and fell. I thought he like tripped and fell, so I laughed. I wanted to get my hand up. He ended up dying immediately. It was his fourth massive heart attack. So at like 12 years old, I had kind of a false faith. My faith was like, God is good equals God's going to give me everything I want and nothing will go wrong. And I grew a massive resentment towards life, God. It was something traumatic I saw in total, beyond him dying, watching my friend watch his dad die. I just wondered, like, why would you do that? It was a beautiful fall day, and I struggled with that. Instead of having faith in God's plan, people die, getting help for healing. I grew anger, and before addiction, it went right to anger. The next couple of years, things just kept happening to me. So I said, all right, whatever. I held that in. I bottled it up. I didn't want anyone to worry about me. I said I'm good, and sure enough, they offered us therapists, and I said no, and did not process that correctly. I probably had a little PTSD and anger and anxiety from it. Things got weird for the next couple of years. Before my first practice for my freshman year of baseball, I fell off a trampoline and ruptured my spleen. Almost died from bleeding internally. Had to go in the ICU for 2 weeks. Got out for a day. Got rushed back to the ICU for another week, and my throat closed up. And they realized that's why it happened. It was from mono. So early on, I see my addiction mindset of not healing with that as like things were happening right away. It was like anger. I'm going to push back. Like things control, things are going the way John wants. So I dealt with anger first, for the next couple of years. If a teacher said something I didn't like, I walked out. If my dad said something I didn't like, I put my head through the wall. If my brother said something I didn't like, I ripped my door off the hinge. And I was just a madman. Just fast forward to towards the end of high school, I try alcohol and weed for the first time. And it's the first time I feel that release I felt as a kid from praying, from going to church, from having a little bit of faith in life. And it worked for me. I do not shy away. I don't think anyone becomes an addict because it doesn't work. It feels good. The problem is I had no stop button, and it ruined the rest of my life. So right away, alcohol was obvious. I mean, even as a teen, everyone would just drink and have flirt with some girls. I would drink to excess, sleep with my friend's girlfriend, beat my friend up. My parents have to pick me up. It was just always signs were early on, and I just didn't catch on. The party's over. I have to go home and start sneaking my dad's and smoking weed out of a Coke can in the garage. Like the party just couldn't end because it made me feel good. I didn't have to think about those pains, anxieties, fears, things I've worked through my self work. And senior year, I finally tried to be like, all right, the signs were evident. I was getting into selling some weed and stuff. Thought it was cool. My brother, looked up to me a lot, and he, always loved like the athlete side of me. How I help people. I always had a big heart, and he was watching me sell weed, fail off teams, and I said, you know what? I had like this glimpse of like, this is our chance. Like, we're not going to get a scholarship. We really got to turn around. Like, I kind of got honest with myself for a moment. Got serious, and had coaches watching. And my first football game, my senior year before baseball, broke my leg in half. That was it for me. I kind of said to God, like, all right, cool. Like, you don't want me to be successful and just help people. And I already had plans, like when I made millions, to do like charities. Like it was about helping people. I just liked playing baseball. Um, and I was pissed. And I right away got into selling Oxycontin and other stuff I'm not proud of. Got introduced to a lot of guys older than me, lost my group of friends, felt alone. Um, Kind of took anyone on that would hang out with me, and they were drug dealers and drug addicts. And one day, sitting around a table, people are snorting pills, and they're like, "Why don't you do a line?" And I was like, "No, I'm just here to make money." And I was drinking and smoking, but I didn't see that as a problem somehow. And I did a line of the Oxycontin 80, and that would take me down a whirlwind for the next 10 years. I remember about 2 days later that I was driving down a main city road here, and I did that pill like 2 days before. I was fine for 2 days, drank and smoked a little. And subconsciously, like I didn't think about it. A thought came in my head, like I should call and get more. And I'll never forget the fear in my heart of like, that was the first time I identified addiction in me. Like, whoa, like I don't really want to, but like my insides, like my subconscious mind is saying we should get more. And I felt like I was at a fork in the road and I made the wrong decision. I called and said, hey, you got some more of that? And you could fast forward to half of my 20s. Physically addicted, wake up dope sick every day, try to get money together, trafficking drugs from New York to Connecticut. Um, not understanding that the people I could hurt, the community I was hurting. My brother pulled away, my parents pulled away. I lived at home always. I think my mom knew I'd probably just go die if she kicked me out. And my dad was not worried about that, but she let me stick around a lot of the time, and I'd be in and out and disappear for times, come back. Never could keep a job. Always had a job. My dad was big on instilling that. So on top of sadly dealing, I always had a job to support my habit. But I'd lose a job, get another job, and it's just sad. You watch your friends. The shame and guilt starts to build. You watch your friends get married, your friends get college degrees, and I didn't realize the impact I had on my parents, which then later in my story comes around as to why I do what I do today. Is I thought I was only hurting myself, and I kind of just pushed everyone off and like, why are they giving me attitude? And didn't realize that my parents had to go to our local grocery store, and people would be like, "Oh," to my friend's parents, like, "What's John doing?" And they had nothing to say. Like, I don't know. He works at a restaurant, like sells drugs. And he's an addict. You know. So fast forward to like 24, 26, 25, something like that. getting in an argument with my girlfriend. At this point, I just lie about everything. Everything's a lie in my life. Where I'm going, who I'm with, where my money went, why I don't my car's not registered, if I got arrested. By 24, I already been arrested 3 times. Um, and I get in a fight with my girlfriend, and my dad just pulls me in the garage, and he's like, "Man, we know you're doing something wrong. We need to know. If you're not going to tell us, you can go live in your car. If you do tell us, we'll do whatever we can to try to help you." And all these little, I don't know what you call them, trademark parts of my story are why I do everything I do today. My parents were not educated on what to do. Who is, as a parent, unless you're somehow an addict yourself or have someone, and they put me on Suboxone. I went there. That was a complete joke. I took it for 30 days. I stopped doing it, and then I still felt the same spiritually, mentally, physically. Um, my character didn't develop at all. I wasn't living a good life still, and I got back, sold it on the street, and got back on heroin. Then I went to heroin. Um, just things got worse and worse. Dealing with worse people. My brother at this point didn't say, and my mom and dad didn't say much more than, "Hey, what's up?" as I walked by. I held my head down low. I couldn't look people in the eyes. And I went to my first rehab after an incident in South Florida. Got jacked, got tan, chased girls on Miami Beach for like 20 days. Didn't soak up anything really about AA or steps or trauma or anything. It was a rehab that really gave you the bare minimum. They didn't look into traumas. They didn't look into anxiety, fears, steps. There's groups where we talked about like, I'm 24-year-old. I like to think good looking guy or okay looking guy and single. And they're like, "Oh, when you go home, you can never go to a bar, people's places, things." And I was like, well, this sucks. Like, I don't want to be sober then. So I got on a plane. And I always say this when I speak to treatment centers. For me, all of addiction is being honest with myself, like actually honest, like not bullshit. When I got there, I told my parents, "I'm an addict. I'm an alcoholic. I can never drink. I can never use again. I found my problem." And on day 30, my mind somehow tricked myself to already tell them, "Oh, no, no, I'm a dope fiend. I could drink when I get home. I could drink." And that scares me to look back because that was something I didn't do consciously, subconscious. That was my addiction disease in my mind, tricking me. And I really believed it. I came home, I got my first paycheck, I got drunk, did coke, and was back on heroin to come off the next morning. That went on for another 2 years, and I was big on like, oh, I've never been caught with drugs. I only got arrested for a few fights, and God really pinned me on that one. So I went back to using, and in 3 years, I got arrested 6 times. Possessions, DUIs, weapons, open container, anything you can imagine. Driving without a license. I had warrants in Connecticut and New York. Finally got arrested, and there was a night where we were going out, and I knew I shouldn't have been driving, and I felt like I wanted to get caught. I'll always be honest with people. I'm a strong guy. I could be tough in some ways, but I was always a little baby when it came to asking for help. I did not have the courage for that, and I get why people struggle today asking for help. So I knew, like, if something bad happens, I'll be forced to get help. And I actually got pulled over. One of my warrants in New York was for never going to court, where I got arrested last time driving with stuff in the car. My God works in funny ways. I got pulled over literally in the same exact spot in New York on the same side of the road. And like, you could have painted, if you drew a circle around my car, the next year my car was there getting arrested again. And I had to tell my parents I got arrested. And I couldn't lie anymore. It's like, obviously you got caught with drugs, you're not sober. So I broke down crying, and I think I just felt death around the corner. My lungs were failing because I snorted heroin. Something weird would happen in my body when I did it. I weighed like 140 pounds. I weighed like, I'm 6'1". It was gray. I could just feel my end was days away. So I got forced into rehab, and this rehab was big on. It's actually the first AA rehab in America, or in the world, and they're big on AA. They don't play around. They offer NA. I like that they were still like, whatever, just do something. But that's the first time I opened my mind. I had the gift of desperation. I finally said, I'm gonna give this a full shot. Whatever they said, the answer was yes. If they said pray, I prayed. Do you want to go to this yoga meeting? I went. I thought meditation was so stupid. They're like, here's an open meditation meeting. I'll be there. They implemented the 12 steps. We had a step coach. I started to understand what AA was, and the 12 steps. I started to understand the higher power idea. I understand how my life was unmanageable with drugs and alcohol. I mean, it's kind of scary that I even had to understand that. I mean, if I really had enough time to tell you the whole story, I should have known it at 19, but I went on for 8 more years just to prove it to myself. I'm a little thick-headed. And, there's one time where my roommate, who then overdosed and died, on heroin, we were having a cigarette. I was there in January. It's up in like the woods in Connecticut. It used to be a farm. And I remember almost crying because I was having a cigarette and it was snowing and we were talking. It was like midnight and you couldn't hear anything but the snow. And I started like choking up and I don't know where it was coming from. Tears just started coming. He's like, "Are you good?" Um, and I was like, "I just never felt peace in the last decade." It chokes me up now to talk about it. It was just that silence, not being in a city, not having the thoughts in your head of, "I owe this guy money. Is my mom going to realize this? And my dad's going to find that dope bag I left out?" Like, I'm late to my job. Like, that's what I hated the most. It was just God couldn't get in because I was too blocked off. So that was heavy. But I got home and I kept that gift of desperation. I got an AA, I got a sponsor, I did the steps, and I got to step 12, where they talk about, the rest of your life is going to be helping other people, and that's going to keep you sober. And I was 28. I had no degree, no future really financially, other than like managing restaurants and stuff. No girlfriend, no wife, no house. So I kind of felt behind the eight ball. So I put AA aside and was like, well, now that I'm cured, I'm gonna go find a wife, make $1 million, and set up my life. Within 3 weeks, I drank, did blow, and took my dad's car because I thought it was mine, and crashed his car. Um, like I said, I'm not good at asking for help. So my idea was move to New York City and drink and do blow for a year, until I got so depressed and dark I had to go back. And that's what I said. My story, I prove it to myself until I really beat myself down. Just how I am a lot of times. And I said, okay, well, this is obviously, again, we're getting close to death. So we're going to look at what we did. And I did an inventory on myself. Everything worked. AA worked, sponsor, meeting, helping others, uh, making amends, and praying every day on my knees. And I'm going to have to just go back and do it and stick with this for good. And my motto is now going to be 12 step. Like, I got to always be helping people. So I went back, and what do you know? Again, my whole life got better in a couple months, making amends, have a job. Everything goes well for the first year. And that was my promise to myself when I did it. I still relapsed for like, they actually used to call me like the relapse king in my home group. I would get like 30 days relapse, 3 days relapse, 60 days relapse. Like, but I kept going, and I'm proud of myself for that. So I did that, and finally one day I was just like, I heard the Jaywalker story in the AA book. For anyone that hasn't heard it, it correlates like an analogy of someone who's addicted to jaywalking to someone who has addiction. And it's like, talks about this guy that he's addicted to jaywalking, and he goes out and he gets hit by a car and breaks his arm. He goes back in to the hospital. He comes out, gets hit again, breaks his back. He goes back in the hospital. He comes out, breaks his neck, goes back in the hospital, and he just doesn't get it. And everything clicked when I heard that one meeting, and I was like, "That's me. Like, what the fuck is wrong with me? Um, I just gotta quit. That's all. I don't gotta try. I just got like, that's not my answer anymore." And there was other little things in AA, and people would say to me that, like, when they speak of like the allergy of the mind, like someone with a nut allergy doesn't do it. Like, I have an allergy. When I have one, I want 1,000. There's no, my dad used to yell at me actually because he didn't know a lot about addiction. Like, why can't you just have one? Um, I'd look at him like he's crazy. I'm like, bro, if you have one beer, I'm not even drinking it. Like, I don't even want one. Like, I'll literally leave it in your fridge. Like, I just want 20 or 30 or nothing. And that shows me that I'm an addict. Just the other day, I have friends over, and I'm going to talk about it now, but I'm very public about my sobriety. And they were like, "Dude, do you think you'll ever drink again?" And they're very supportive. They wouldn't push. If I said, "Can I have a drink?" They'd probably punch me in the face. But they're like, in your heart, like, do you think you're gonna drink again? And I was like, let me think about it. So I actually thought it through. And I was like, well, today is still not safe. And they're like, why? And I was like, because right away I thought about the seventh drink or the fifth drink. I was like, the normal person, and my mom and dad thinks about like their one glass of wine. So I was like, yep, nope, still an addict. And that's how I take my sobriety. It's one day at a time. Um, getting sober on the younger side. I relapsed a lot, thinking about I can never drink again. Like none of that mattered. It's really one day at a time for me. I'm gonna go to bed tonight by the grace of God sober and try to do the same thing tomorrow. And if I do that every day and not worry about it, it's worked so far for almost 6 years. So I stick with that mentality. So the first year went great. 3 days after my year celebration meeting at AA, I got my coin. Um, the world shut down due to COVID. It was March 2020. And being a good egotistical, self-loathing addict, I called my sponsor and I was like, what the fuck's the point of this? I got sober after 10 years. Now the world shuts down. And, I have some really tough mentors. And right away, they're like, yo, you think the world gives a shit about you? You decided to stop smoking crack. It's someone else's problem. Why didn't you stop 4 years earlier? And they keep me humble that way. And it's funny to me today. And I needed to hear that. It was true, like I can't let out exterior things change me. So I took on 12 stepping. That's my thing in my sobriety, helping others and service. And I chaired meetings. I chaired Zoom meetings for rehabs and detoxes. I chaired my home group for like a year. No one wanted to do it, uh, but a bunch of lazy old timers. But I was doing well. It was still tough, but I was working, and I mean, as an addict, was always home with nothing from rehab. I did well. I thrived in it. I learned how to work out every day, pray, meditate, do whatever. And then in July, in 1 week, I had that my friend relapsed from the one I was smoking a cigarette with, my roommate, and died. Kid I grew up with on my football team killed himself with 3 years sobriety, and then I was feeling shaky on Wednesday. I already had two deaths. And then that Friday, my childhood best friend, that's like a brother to me, took a Xanax pill. He was one of those people that just wouldn't get fully sober. AA didn't work for him. Nothing worked for him. Celebrate Recovery, rehab, and always had to drink and do Suboxone and stuff. And he took a Xanax pill, amazing kid, my best friend. And it was pressed with fentanyl, and his girl found him dead in his grass that Friday. So in a week, 3 people died. COVID's going on, and that 1 year sobriety felt really small. I felt the darkness, the grief rolling in, and I called my sponsor and said, "Man, I think I'm gonna relapse. Like this is getting heavy, man. Like COVID was one thing, but this is a lot. Like that was my best friend, and he's like, I don't know what to tell you, man. Help others. That's all I keep telling you. Service other people." So I didn't know what to do. Um, I went on a run. Prayed before and was like, God, I don't even know who you are at this point. I was a year sober. But I was like, just give me a vision or idea of like, what do you want me to do here? Why are we doing this? And halfway through the run, just struck an idea out of nowhere while I was gasping for air 3 miles in. And I was like, wow, social media. Like, I'm stuck at home. I can't help people, but social media, I can help as many people as I want. Like, everyone's dying in my local area in Connecticut from heroin. I'll just start posting that, like, I'm an addict, alcoholic, reach out if you want help. And I started to do that. It took off. I went from, you know, the drug dealer, drug addict, failed sports star, uh, to having teachers that hated me reaching out for help for their kids, friends that hated me from high school reaching out for help, people just saying they're proud of me. And it wasn't for the ego, it was about an amends that I never even thought I had to make to my community, to my parents. My parents could hold their head high. I remember my brother coming home one time telling me, "Oh, I just want to say I'm proud of you," because he's like, I used to go to the bar and my family was well known, like I said, just sports, small town, brother and me. And he's like, people would always be like, "Oh, what's up with John? How's he doing?" And basically, they're like, "How's your drug dealer, addict brother?" And he's like, "Now people, I can't walk through the bar without 10 people stopping me. Like your brother's killing it. He's helping other people and all that stuff." And that's what it's for. It's not for them to say to me. It's for them to say to my family. When people tell me how great I do, I really don't care. I mean, it's cool to hear, but I do it to save lives and to make amends. To amend to God, amend to myself. And it was doing well. So I called it Get Lifted. It was Get Lifted spiritually, mentally, physically. It's a thing I came up with that my sponsor called a spiritual bank account. I called him one day in sobriety and I was like, "Hey, I'm not too happy. Like I'm 6 months sober. Like I don't feel that pink cloud anymore. And he's like, what'd you do today? And I was like, Snapchat a girl, smoked a bunch of cigarettes, made a smoothie, played video games for 4 hours. And he started laughing at me. He's like, you expect to be happy? And I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, dude, your actions are basically going to correlate to how happy you are. He's like, I call it a spiritual bank account. You manage your money. You don't just go spend $1 million today. Uh, he was like, you got to look as you wake up, you're at zero. You got to do work. So he's like, you got to pray. That's $20. Work out. That's $30. So on and so forth. Go to a meeting. That's $50. And pretty basic shit. But to me, I was very just uneducated in all of life. And I was like, monumental to me. I was like, there we go. Uh, and one of my mentors always says, how free do you want to be? I could chill on the couch all day and my night might be shaky. I can do all those things. I could feel like $1 million. So I started to post on that. I made clothing wear sold out. Called Get Lifted. It's like this guy lifting weights in the sky. Gave some of the money back. It started to be who I was, to help people. And my family was proud of me and brother proud of me. And it's opened amazing doors for me today. Sadly, a year later, July 2021, my brother reached out a few times. He always had a bit of a drinking problem, a lot of characteristics of me, but he told me he learned from me how to not be an idiot and get caught. I put him through a lot of trauma. He had a couple things just go on before that, and he asked for help. He was going to come to his first AA meeting that Saturday morning. And when I woke up for the meeting, instead the cops were at my front door, let me know that my brother had killed himself. He got in a fight with a girlfriend drinking, and at 4 a.m. he decided to shoot himself. My world was rocked yet again. He threatened that to me drunk, to be honest, a couple weeks, maybe a month before, and it put me in a really bad place in my sobriety. I didn't know. My brother was going to do what he was going to do, and I loved him for that. But he was really intoxicated. He never was a mess like that. Promised me the next day. He was just drunk and blah, 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 blah. He did reach out to help my parents, but due to COVID, he couldn't see a therapist for a few months. Just a lot of stuff. And I told him when we talked, I was like, bro, that's the one thing that could rock my sobriety. Like my mom and dad are supposed to die. My grandparents are going to die. Some friends aren't going to make it, but I was like, I can't with that. Even think about that. He was my world. And that was tough, man. But I took a breath, took a second, and thought about, what would my crazy ass sponsors and mentors say. And I was like, you know what? They're going to tell me it's no more about baby John. I was a 31-year-old man at that time. Like it was time for me to actually be there for my parents for once. I made amends to my brother and told him no matter what happens to me or him, I will stay sober and help other people. Um, I had to step up. It was enough of being like, there's always an excuse to drink. There is no excuse to drink or use. And sadly, through life, I've already had, at that point, 15 people I knew well pass away to overdose. So I kind of already had like a viewpoint on dealing with death and grief and afterlife and faith. So sadly, that I feel like God kind of prepped me in that way. And yeah, I did my AA and sobriety, whatever you want to call it, stuff. I consoled my parents. I went and cried in my room. Prayed on my knees and just went through my sobriety stuff. I prayed on my knees, asked God for the strength to keep me sober, da 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 da. Watch over my brother and forgive him. I went out, had a cigarette. I called my sponsor. I then called my sober network or group chat. I told them like, guys, this happened. I'm gonna need you to hold me accountable. And I was at a meeting the next day, blowing my eyes out. But it held me accountable and made me sober, kept me sober. So through sobriety, those are a couple hard things, but I share those today to show that there is no reason to drink for anyone. And I turn everything I struggle with today into a purpose. 6 months later, my parents told me they wanted to sell their childhood home, my childhood home, and move from Connecticut to South Carolina where my grandparents live and be by the beach and heal. That was a huge knock to the chest. Like I felt connected to my brother there. I wasn't ready for all that. But again, I did my stuff. I moved them down there, and everything happens for a reason. because I already had the social media stuff, people are like, you should write a book. I graduated high school by one paper. I really didn't even know where to start. But I thought, how Get Lifted social media helped me from my friends, and they would be proud. I was like, I'll write this book and dedicate it to my brother. So I started writing and just used the stuff in sobriety. When I didn't know, I asked for help. I got guidance. I had people help me and teach me. Um, I wrote a book, and I moved back up to Connecticut about 8 months after, once my parents were like settled doing their own thing, and life was kind of back to normal. And I published Life on Life's Terms on December 2023. I have one here. I know most people here know what it is, but this is it. Went number one, new release on Amazon in all genres, which blew me out of the water. Second, I hit publish. I was bawling my eyes out, singing about my brother and stuff like that. And it was a really cool experience. I mean, it opened doors for me, even just to publish a book. If none sold, I mean, I literally had holes in my shoes, you know, detoxing in my bed every morning at my parents' house, owing drug dealers money, dying every day. Like just to do that was like a cool thing in sobriety. And from there, it's just been more blessings. I mean, my life, when they say life beyond your wildest dreams, I always thought of like $1 million. I don't have 1 million yet, and I'm pretty far still, but we're working towards it. But I do it in life. There's times I actually had a panic attack one time. It's in a good way if anyone's in new early sobriety, but it's could be looked at good. I literally had a panic attack one day because I go so hard in my sobriety because I didn't recognize my life. I was at a book signing, and I think my brain just couldn't compute. It's still half of my brain is still that kid driving around waiting for a dealer, smoking crack out of a pipe, falling asleep against a dumpster. And then another half of my brain is in like, oh, I'm a published author signing here, pay me to give me your autograph. Like I think sometimes my brain is still trying to catch up. But that's a cool thing to deal with. I'd rather have a panic attack over that than, some worse shit. And today it's about keeping it simple, even with these big things going on. Like Lauren and Des have been on the podcast. It's a really cool thing I get to do. I do keynote speeches. I get paid to hold workshops for juvenile arrested youth in Connecticut, substance abuse and personal development. I'm currently a brand ambassador and about to be a part owner of a treatment center in Texas. Just the devil tries to knock you down, but the more you stay with it, that next chapter is even bigger. Things I just couldn't imagine. Yeah, I mean, some of the coolest things were like, this is my own place. It's not so much the material stuff. It's just I never even could imagine sitting in my own place because I couldn't get enough money to not pay for gas and change back then. When I put up my first Christmas tree, um, I remember I put it up in here and I just started crying. I don't know what I keep saying that tonight. I think I've cried 5 times in the last 10 years. I've said them all tonight, but they're like joy tears. Like I was just like, what the hell? I have my own Christmas tree. Watching summer nights, the Yankees game with my deck door open and relaxing. Like those are the even bigger than number one book or this and that. It's like that peace and quiet and not chasing chaos, being able to live in the middle lane. And it hasn't always gone well. I mean, after my brother, I got into gambling. Thank God I didn't take it down a terrible path, but I saw the things getting shaky, and I was like, I don't think the average person spends 2 days a week in a casino. I had a girlfriend at the time, thankfully, uh, and people kind of were just like, just be careful. But I think that was becoming that anything. I'm an addict, so it could be gambling, sex, whatever I could use to handle with pain. And my brother was unimaginable amount of pain emotionally. But it's okay today. I'm self-aware where, like I said, it's all about being honest with myself. That I could look in the mirror and be like, all right, cool. We gambled. We spent a couple thousand in a couple weeks, but like, this isn't trending well, John. Like it's about staying sober and being able to wrap that back in. And as long as I didn't drink or use to get back in my meetings, back in my gym, back in my meditations. Um, and I'm grateful for that today. I mean, I think anyone could do it. I think anyone could do anything. But the hardest thing now is I help people. A big part of my business is helping people get into treatment because I have so many people. Got my TikTok up to a lot of followers and a million views a week. So I had to connect a way to get people help because they asked so much. I didn't have exact help to get them. So that's where the part owner came in and stuff over treatment center. Um, but the hardest thing is just being on the other side and watching people have it right in front of them. They could have the best insurance, supporting parents, the money for the plane ticket. And the week before, they were watching people shadow people outside their window, 15 floors up in New York City. But then they're telling me, oh, I don't think I need to go. And it's like, I feel for my parents. That's how much it must have been with me. I want to pull my hair out. I'm like, you were about to jump off your balcony 2 nights ago. Like, and sadly, I can relate in addiction. That was me. I'm no better than that. I think you just want to see everyone succeed, and it's really hard not to. So I just try to keep it simple today. Help other people, make sure I'm my best self. If I'm getting lifted to my best ability spiritually, I could be available to possibly help one other person today, and that's pretty cool. So it's really all I got. Thanks for letting me share. I'm grateful Tez asked me to come on.